Welcome to Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere with your host, Chris Parker.
And welcome back to Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere. This is Chris Parker, and I'm having a conversation with Mischa Muntinga. I'm going to pronounce it again. This is not an easy one for the Americans. In American, I would call it Muntinga, which is a complete bastardization. So it's Mischa Muntinga. Yay. From Rotterdam, and he's a strategic change consultant about many things, including digital, operating, I think oftentimes or exclusively in the financial services sector here in the Netherlands. And we've already been having a bit of a chat, but we're going to get into it deeper and discover maybe our own views and maybe some differences of opinion around strategic change. Maybe in larger organizations, and how his group, Equitim, which you can find at equitim.nl, supports organizations in that space. So, Mischa, after I have finally succeeded in pronouncing your last name, I would love it if you can share what is it that you do and why are you doing what you do?
Thanks, Chris, for the invitation and the conversation. What is it what I do? We at Equitim and me in person, we help financial industry organizations to, let's say, we call it regie op verandering, which is in English direct their change, in a way where technology plays a vital role. And our belief is that we do it with them, not for them. And to implement sustainable change in a good way, we believe you need to look at the strategy and rationale behind it, to look at the design. So we call that often working under architecture, like buildings and stuff. You need to look at the people side of it. And you need to utilize implementation skills. And through those four lenses, we help those clients implement strategic change and become more successful or relevant in their industry.
I'm laughing because strategy, design, or architecture, people, and implementation aren't those things that most organizations are really good at, so they don't need your support at all. I say very facetiously because those.
So I like the question. Because what we see is, so it is not that we are the best strategy designers. Even I would say we don't do that, but you need to have that to take the next step. Typically, in what our experience is in financial industry organizations, there's a lot of very smart people working in those organizations, and they're very good in a certain piece in their business. Can be accounting, financial engineering, but it's content driven. But to implement a change, whether that's restructuring, redesign, or a new product, whatever, you need to connect all the dots. And that is a skill to make sure you're going in the right direction, but also connect all the relevant people, typically called stakeholder management. To do that in good cooperation, that requires different skills. And our experience is that those skills are, let's say, less there. And that is what we offer them to them on a consultancy or an interim basis to help realize the change that they need.
I can imagine, and we'll dive into some of the realities of financial services, also maybe from my experience. But the geniuses in the silos that need some transversal support, I definitely see that. But before we get into that, I'm curious to go back to the original question, which is the why. And I'm curious really the why for you, meaning how is this your passion, or how, what is it that drove you from going into this type of work?
So originally I was, when I finished university, I was trained as a tax lawyer, which is something completely different than I do today. And I like the tech liner principle. I've never done it, so I think I can do it. And this is so only 5 years ago, I landed in the change world. I've worked for many years at Aegon, the insurance company based in The Hague, predominantly in their asset management division. And delivering change is hard. It's difficult. I haven't done it before the role I got. I liked it. It's different every day. It requires a certain skill. I like to connect with people. And after I've done that in Aegon for a number of years, I really like to, and when I separated with Aegon, the idea appealed to me to work with a small group of people to build a new business and see if we can help other clients with what we have learned and experienced in a incredibly interesting world today with the fast pace of change. Everybody knows that. So that's one driver. And the other driver is I've been a client of consultants for many years, the big names and smaller names. And I think there's also an opportunity to do consultancy in a different way than just drafting the best slide deck there is, and then on the final but last page put the hourly rates, and then on the last page the general terms, and ask if you could just sign at the bottom. So that's not what we do. So those are my, let's say, drives to see if we can build a successful business out of this. And that is not just around growth and hiring hundreds of consultants in a couple of years' time, but just really help and support clients, learn from it also ourselves, and take it step by step and see if we can be a relevant player in the field.
I'm going to accept the invitation to go down that rabbit hole around tax. So I'm curious. So change management, organizational change, digital change. What did you learn in your years? Because I see on your LinkedIn, PwC, also Aegon is tax. What did you learn as a trained, tax professional that gave you insights for organizational change? And the dimension that I'm going to talk about later is I'm a trained accountant, and so I'm curious, what did you get from your tax or accounting background that brought you into this? And then I'm curious if that has any comparisons with my own journey.
Yeah. So I would say that for me, it's not just about why I studied tax was because I like the combination of law and economics. And then when I started working, I pretty soon learned that it's the puzzle that needs to fit. So you can say I have the best solution from a pure tax perspective, but if the tax authorities don't like it, then it's not a solution. But especially from listed corporates, if it doesn't work in the accounting, it's not working. But also if it's not working for the business to just practically implement what you figured out, it's not working. So it's the whole puzzle needs to fit. That's different perspectives, what I like working on stuff. And that's also about change management, because you can't just look at it from one angle. It is most of the times or always much more complicated, and you need to figure out how to look at the problem, ask many questions to make sure you understand the problem before talking about solutions.
From my experience, I remember like some of my audit courses, which were really asking the questions and getting the why behind the why behind the why. And also for me, I think viewing the world from, and it might sound harsh, but from an income statement or balance sheet is a different world than maybe a lot of maybe traditional consultants or certainly technology or digital people see it. So sometimes I find myself looking at and speaking to the executives in a way that they can resonate with more than maybe my digital or tech counterparts? Do you find you connect with the leadership differently based on with tax? It's a very broad experience. You have to have a very broad perspective of an organization. Does that help you out as well, or what's your feeling there?
Yeah, so the benefit of working in a tax department of a large multinational corporate is that you quickly start to develop a picture of the whole organization because you're in that spot where you need that. And then what we always made was kind of a running gag was, we have the accounting world and you have the real world. And those are different. I also learned that when you have in an organization, let's say call it the accounting or the financial world is completely separated from the real world, it's not working, because then the people either talking to clients or building new products, if they don't have any understanding or context of the financials of the organization, they miss something, and the other way around. So also there it's about connecting both worlds, but they both exist.
Yeah. I think it's seeing the world from those multi dimensions. So continuing on our journey past strategy into design, you talked about I think architecturally driven or architecturally supported. How does that come into your work and your dialogue?
So we often are asked on, let's say, questions like looking at a architecture setup of an organization, or advice around implementing a new software application or those kind of projects. I'm not an IT trained person, but what I do know and experience, if you need to, and there's a lot of legacy in lots of organizations, especially the bigger ones, but that's there for a reason. If you ask an architect to design a building, then he will start drawing and designing and experiment, and until there's something that is, let's say, appealed by a client to further work on. Working under architecture, so to say, you can renovate your house with just a builder, or you can ask an architect to first make a design and then renovate it. That's also what we call it, let's say, when you are restructuring or reorganizing your IT or enterprise setup, that we believe in working under architecture is what you need to make sure whatever you're going to implement is sustainable and is working. And otherwise you run the risk that you create, let's say, future legacy.
Yeah, I'm gonna celebrate what you're saying and ask, in financial services, oftentimes, in my experience, architecture as a function can be sometimes even further away from reality than the accountants. That they get very busy architecting, and therefore have no time to actually talk to people who actually need stuff done. So I'm curious how in financial services, which are complex beasts with lots of legacy, how do you connect those dots? How do you bring that architecture, working under architecture, to life and to get people to use it actually for decision making?
Well, the first one is to be, you need to have the right people that can connect both worlds, because I have seen what you're describing as well in my experience, where with all good intentions, an architect draws up lots of complex diagrams, and then there's no connection anymore, because the other side of the table thinks, well, good job, but I haven't got any clue about what you're trying to tell or ask me. So, and that's a difficult one, because you need to bring the call it the boardroom closer to technology, and you need to explain technology in a way that it's basically there's an invitation to join the dialogue, so to say, which is difficult. So it starts with, let's say, having that skill to do both and be a credible counterpart in the dialogue for people in the boardroom. That's the first thing I would say.
Yeah, a thing I would add to that is oftentimes in banks, in financial services, it's opposed, with high margin businesses versus low margin businesses. High margin businesses, for me, the very smart people in their silo seem to go back to mandate, meaning I have the mandate to tell you what to do, which oftentimes fails where influence and conversation and having that human dialogue with the board can work. So it's I guess that's the connection to the third of the four lenses, which is people, getting the right people on board for the change. And this is at multiple levels. I'm picking your brain very selfishly here because it sounds like you have some wonderful experience. How do you know if you have the right people on the bus and if they're in the right seats for a big change? Because it's oftentimes these changes are going into truly uncharted territories.
Yeah, I like the question, Chris. I'm not sure whether I have a let's say silver bullet solution here. It's probably not. It is. You need to have start with, and I've learned that by experience. You start the dialogue as soon as you can about what is to be changed or what could be changed. Making sure there is. It needs to. When you're going to change something, if that needs to be a bit uncomfortable. If people are completely comfortable, not sure if they're in, because then they might be. They might have a different agenda. It needs to be supported from the top, which is something different than directed from the top. What I mean with support is that you have there's an ask or a question to get something, get to certain outcomes, and then give people a mandate to just see whatever they can do to get there, which also means that kind of delegation is okay. If it's not going as planned, then I back you up with support rather than with punishment, so to say. So it means a lot of conversations to make sure that the people that are directly involved, but also people indirectly involved, are aware or feeling the sense of urgency that something needs to change. Not sure whether that's a clear answer to your question, but at least it's an attempt.
Well, it's a good attempt. And I think it's probably an unfair question because how do you know before you've actually started and how have you had that discussion? I guess for me, the thing I would add is just don't be rigid. So if you find people who are outcome based, that I love what you just said about getting the actual outcome from the executive. This is what we really want to truly achieve. And oftentimes that outcome can get lost in process and procedure and bureaucracy and BS. If you have people that can be fanatical on the outcome and find new ways of achieving the change, and then just continue to reflect if you've got the right people, personality, skills around the table. I'm not sure what else you can do other than just acknowledge that you don't know at the time, which we'll come back to that as far as curiosity. We'll come back to that in a moment. And
I would add, and in that process, don't shy away from the, let's say, uncomfortable or difficult conversations sometimes. So if you're doubting whether a person is in or out, don't let it happen for weeks or months. Just call it out and see where somebody is, and then so it can be okay to just say, well, maybe it's not for me.
And that's perfectly okay. What's coming to my mind is the forming, storming, norming, performing cycle. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Would you like to share it and see how do you use that cycle of team dynamics in your work? Is that something that is part of your language, or?
Yeah, but I would say I've used it as I'm just in consulting less than a year. It should be, let's say, now more in my toolbox to actively promote it and as a tool. So I'm more of a on the other side of the experience, so to say, than actively put it on the table as a tool.
Yeah, for me, and I love the model because it's simple and it applies everywhere.
Yeah.
That if you have a group of people coming together to achieve something, and that could be going on a vacation, it could be going to the park, it could be a major business transformation in the bank. With the different perspectives of the people, some of them will not be checked in, like you said. And it's only once you get through storming, which is some sort of friction, and that doesn't have to be painful arguing, that could also be a team building. It's whatever the friction is to unearth people's needs, and then have a discussion on how to work together, and then perform until something changes, and you just keep cycling through it. And so what I was triggered when you were saying is to find, to discover early on if people aren't really in the game, and discover that soon, because, either you can work to get them in the game or you can get them onto a different bus.
Yeah.
But leaving them there unknown, I think, is probably the most disastrous, because that would be less pleasurable for them and wasteful for the company.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've been, my experiences, I've been part of a team where there was work to be done in the team to really make sure we would act as a team. So then I asked I explained that to my boss, my observations, and I said, either we're gonna, let's say, work with the team to make sure we get through those phases. If that's not an option, you need to just, and then there's two options. One, you need to change people in the team, or if that's not feasible, which sometimes can be the case, then you can't, then that means the outcome or the deliverables from the team will be suboptimal. So then you need to adjust, let's say, the ambition, because you can't set a, let's say, high performing team ambition for a team that is not in its in the way of the members capable of delivering that. So those are kind of the mechanics you can use.
I'm curious, the fourth lens in the change method of Equitem is implementation skills. And yeah. I'm just going to check in, because having that grown-up adult conversation about the reality of the situation, I imagine, is in the implementation skills toolbox that a lot of times large legacy organizations haven't used that muscle much lately. Is this part of the implementation skills approach for you? Because I think that having that kind of on spot, on target conversation about that needs to get fixed or this won't get done, I think is an incredible skill for these types of projects.
Yeah, so for us that starts with, let's say, if it is just being a good project manager, so to say. And I use now the label project manager, but nowadays, let's say, job titles can be different. It is also about prioritizing. So if you look at the portfolio of project, making sure you can prioritize 10 items on number one, and then you have a portfolio for 150 items still to be done, and then not providing the clarity to the team and teams of, okay, what is the top three for the coming period, those kind of skills, because that is what I often see lacks. So that is requires dialogues with management or boards, and then it's about just acting just as a delivery or project manager, connecting all the dots, because most of the times there are a lot of good, qualified, smart people that know what needs to be done in their area or expertise, but that won't work if the other pieces are not, let's say, helping to fit that puzzle. So and that is a skill that in our experience typically is scarce in financial services organizations, because
Why?
There's so many specialists. They are those organizations are typically they're organized around tasks and specialisms. So either traders, portfolio managers, or accountants, or tax lawyers, my previous job, or whatever. And they're very good in that. But yeah, you need, for a lot of projects, you need a number of specialists and then working together to get to the outcome you need. And that is the skill that is less available typically. I would think it's also at least in the past, it was less rewarded. And yeah, so that's where we can, where we believe we can add a lot of value to those organizations.
So I'm inspired to ask, before we press record, we were talking a little bit about the simplicity scan, which is the canvas that sometimes I use also for architecture and change to stimulate these dialogues. And on the left side, there's that, customer, product, and journey. So what is, for you, if people are listening, and my world is very much in financial services, so there very well could be people from these large banks suffering from some of these anti-patterns that you're mentioning. For Equitem, what is the perfect customer or persona, and what would you love to do with them and for them, and how would that look? So how would you describe your ideal engagement? And then maybe there's people listening who go, hey, that's me. And then they can get in touch. I would love that to happen as well. So what does your perfect customer and their problem look like?
So we are focusing at the moment with a strategic partner on the investment management, let's say, industry within financial services, asset managers. I would say the mid-size kind of players in that field are sweet spot clients where they have an organization, but they lack, because of their size, they lack certain skills that we can offer. A lot of those organizations they need a lot of change in technology, in their setup, in their operating model, because of there's a lot of changes in the landscape, typically driven by the new pension agreement in the Netherlands, which is not even agreed already completely in terms of laws and regulations. But we know in the next 5 years that needs to be implemented by all pension funds, and that has a knock-on effect on asset managers. We can help them with looking at that, asking a lot of questions. Okay, what does that mean for you? What are your options in terms of operating model, technology, and how can we help them with preparing for the new future, so to say? We do already at the moment for one client, where they looked at their operating model last year. They decided that one of their applications, software applications, which they only used for their back office functions, they're now implementing that front to back as a solution. And we are helping with them with the coming year, together with the software provider to renovate that and redesign and re-implement that for the future. And we add delivery, project management skills to the client. We help them in decision making, which can often be a very complex process because it can be determining on the number of dollars that is involved. Let's say a complex route to get the approvals to and the funding to do what needs to be done. And then we can add architecture skills, business data analysts, and just delivery skills to get the job done.
Sounds great. In a nutshell, what is the pension law change that's driving all this?
It is called the new pension agreement, and it will be a big change where typically the arrangements between the members and the pension fund will much more depend on the development of the investments. So it's a movement from DB more to DC in a nutshell, so to say. And that means a lot for the landscape and the industry, and a lot more. And it's almost a 2 trillion assets under management kind of industry in the Netherlands because of our history of saving in that kind of schemes. So that's a big thing that needs to be done.
Well, there must be quite a few people scratching their heads wondering how to approach this. So
yeah.
So, love it. Last question for me is one of your sayings, and I've been saving this for last, is don't judge, be curious. And I'm curious, what does that mean to you, and how does that come to life in your work?
That is for me it's almost kind of a principle, because if I now work with new clients or potential clients, the rabbit hole for me, or the pitfall, will be to just show them I have a solution for everything, and after just one conversation and say we need to do it like this or like that. But I believe in staying, as long as you can, stay curious. Don't share opinions too fast, because we're not short on opinions. We're short on asking the good questions. And that helps to sharpen your view, your perspective. It helps to onboard people because they feel heard. And it helps to deliver what is needed, and don't spend any time on what's not needed, because it doesn't add any value. And that's where I believe in. I had a nice conversation, I think last week or 2 weeks before, with somebody about I would say the news industry, where the person told me, because of the number now of self-employed journalists, and there are a lot of them, which I heard, are self-employed because they need to be, rather than it's an active choice. They need a headline to be able to sell an article to those agencies. And that means that it's now a lot more about selling headlines rather than selling a story which is backed up by a deep dive of investigation and just good, proper content journalism, which is also about judging too soon and not staying long enough curious.
Great. I can imagine when you're coming into these uncharted territories with organizations, financial services, pension funds, asset managers, which are themselves very complex, and the different silos have the different opinions. I think your Socratic approach, your curiosity approach, I'm sure pays dividends. Because what I do see also many times with organizations, they hire consultancies to come in, and the consultancies come in with playbooks, opinion, answers from wherever. However, it might be an artificial comfort in the beginning, but the chance of it truly solving the problem based on the context of the organization, sometimes very low. So lovely. Mischa, we're wrapping up. I want to open it up, however, in case there's anything that you think we've left out, or that you'd like to dive into.
No, I enjoyed the conversation, knowing you a bit more and learning from it. I think we should find a way of, let's say, matching simplicity with curiosity, maybe. That's for us be a follow-up conversation, which I'm looking forward to. And thanks for having me and the opportunity. Love it. Yeah, simplicity. You can only achieve simplicity through curiosity. So there's a natural harmony there. I would like to unashamedly shout out that, and I'll put the link onto the show notes,
at equitem.nl/category/white papers. There's a bunch of white papers, including a 100-day plan. There's some other information there that's already just value that people can get on the Equitem approach. So Mischa Muntinga, yay. Great to have you. Delightful conversation. And thank you so much. And look forward to talking to you sometime about simplicity and curiosity.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player and download the Simplicity Kit from Ebullient.com.